Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Richard Edelman of the global communications firm Edelman. He is the CEO, and I believe you are also the person who created what's now in its 24th year, the Edelman Trust Barometer that will come out at the World Economic Forum this week in Davos. Richard, good to see you. Talk about what really stood out to you in this year's survey.
Diane, we found a fourth log on the populist fire, which is innovation poorly managed, which means not well regulated, not considering broader societal impacts, and not understandable to the public. And by 2-to-1 across the countries that we study, we find real concern about AI, about mRNA vaccines, genetic modified organisms for food, and green energy. And it's stunning to us that innovation has become politicized. For example, in the United States, you find a 40-point difference between Republicans and Democrats on willingness to accept these new vaccines or EVs or small nuclear plants. And also a massive 20-point gap between the top quartile of income and the bottom quartile, which means, again, that here we are with that which business should make a virtue now turning into a part of the forest fire.
I'm trying to figure out, I'm fascinated with that Republican-Democrat divide you mentioned with regard to views of innovation. I understand, given all the conversations around vaccines and anti-vaxxers and such during the pandemic, that particular aspect of innovation would really touch a nerve. Why do you think there's such a big divide overall? I mean, I want to make sure that when we're talking about innovation, if we're talking about it writ large, or if we're really talking about specific types that have been frankly politicized, by the politicians too.
Well, what amazed us is it's across age groups, it's across gender, it's across education levels, and in many countries across income levels. This is the one issue around which everyone agrees in the world, innovation is not being well managed. It gets politicized because groups believe that government is forcing it. It's going too quickly. It might in some way clash with their values, also jeopardize their position in society. Remember, there's not a single democracy that has over 30% belief in the West about their family being better off in 5 years. There are also now real concerns, not just personal ones about inflation, cost of living, but also about nuclear war, info wars, the climate. So it's societal and personal coming together. So people are agitated and they want to know if there's going to be change, that they're going to be considered. And they need to be able to understand it. It needs to be in plain English, and it needs to be with scientists who are still trusted, but science is not. So we've got to bring science and society back together. Simple terms, frequent communication, and give people time to absorb it.
It's fascinating that the World Economic Forum theme this year is rebuilding trust. And I know the barometer is, it is a moment in time, but it's also a tool that can be used to actually alleviate some of these issues that you identify country by country. What do you see as the levers that really need to be pulled, especially by business leaders who do seem to rank higher on those trust scores, to try to address these issues?
So, Diane, in the last 3 or 4 years, business has been drawn into issues like ESG or into sustainability or into the geopolitics. But innovation has always been in the center of the plate for business. But we have to take seriously this call from the public to say, we're not automatically going to accept innovation. It's not a given. We had a bad experience with the pandemic. I mean, I even saw this morning a revelation that Dr. Fauci acknowledged that the 6-foot distancing that we did during the pandemic wasn't scientifically proven. So these things chip away at trust. And so business has to grab this. Business is the most trusted institution, has been for the last 4 years, 4 studies. And business is seen as far more competent and ethical than government. But business has to do this in the right way, which is to partner with government for good regulation, partner with NGOs to make sure that we've got retraining and upskilling. And lastly, work with the media to get good information out. Because this infodemic, this people going to their own thought bubbles, is really a caustic figure. We've got to make sure that people have the facts and they'll make the right decisions.
I was glad to see journalists went up 2 or 3 points, I think, finally,
Yep.
still at the bottom of the totem pole. But, you know, I want to underscore the fact that you do 28 countries, and Americans, I believe, were the least likely to think that innovation is being well managed, which is fascinating given that this is a country known for innovation. Are we just more skeptical people, or do you think it's emblematic of a deeper problem in this country?
Well, I'm afraid that innovation has become politicized, and it's seen as either benefiting the rich or being controlled by government. And it's neither. We have to disabuse people of those myths and show people how it's going to benefit them individually, and explain and answer their questions, be patient, and not have this be something that is being foisted upon them, but something that on the basis of efficiency, but in fact is going to make their lives better. Again, the example of Walmart's partnership with Microsoft to enable families to have the benefit of the stores knowing that you need more milk over Christmas break because your college kids are coming back from school. And that, in fact, the store will, in a way, react to your customized needs. We should use AI to people's benefit.
So creating solutions. I think that's a very good point. Let me also ask what was on your radar reading this, going through this report that you'd like to put on ours, especially about some of the other countries, because you do survey 28 countries, and I think it's always interesting to see how those trust scores are shifting.
I want to point out that we see there's sort of 3 macro trends on top of this innovation one. The mass class divide, we see the business government mismatch in terms of trust and the infodemic. But on the mass class divide, it's clearly becoming an issue in developing markets. We see, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, that it's 25 points now between the elites and the bottom quartile on trusted institutions. Also, I want to point out that China, for the first time, we see real evidence of people questioning this too close relationship between government and science. So, in fact, the Chinese, 2/3 of them say the process of scientific development is too politicized. 75% of them said there's too much government interference in science. So that's a way of the Chinese people saying, I've had a bad pandemic, and we can do better here.
Interesting. Well, I think this will be very widely used during the meeting. And of course, I think it's something that a lot of leaders will look at too. Is there any other advice you have for people in the business community? I think we've tried to keep politics out of the office for very obvious reasons of civil society, everybody getting along, getting work done. That does not seem to be an option at this point, does it? People want to basically discuss these issues at work.
My message to business people is, this is your moment. Innovation is what you do best. And we can turn around this depressed situation on trust by making sure that we spend as much time on the acceptance as we do on the invention. That it can't just be about the R&D, it has to be about explaining why and how it's good for the people. And for specifics, and simple phrases, and taking time, and also finding non-traditional authority figures, pastors and local doctors and people who are close. Because what happened is, Diane, trust has become local. Trust is in people close to me, my company, my CEO, because I have control over that relationship. I want to know that I'm hearing it from authority figures, but also from the non-traditional ones.
Good advice. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. Of course, this now in its 24th year, we have a long way to go, but it's very helpful to have the tools you provide. So thanks for joining us, Richard.
Thank you so much, Diane.